What if you were one bad day from losing your mind? One bad day from going off the edge and never coming back? Well, that's Joker's proposition to Batman. Hello, everyone. Today, I would like to talk to you about one of my favorite Batman comics, Batman the Killing Joke. If you're unaware of what The Killing Joke is, it's a 1988 graphic novel made by Alan Moore that goes through the downfall and backstory of the Joker and shows the relationship that Batman and the Joker actually have, and it's very interesting, which is why I want to make a video on it. I'm not going to talk about the actual production of it much more, I really just want to talk about it, so let's begin. The story opens with 9 panels. It's a rainy night in Gotham, nothing new for the city. The second panel shows a reflection of the Batmobile's headlights on the ground, and don't forget about this, I am going to talk about this later. I just wanted to establish that the lights and ideas of people being on one side of a light or the other side of the light is kind of a running theme. It's something that I reach a little bit when it comes to this video, but I like to reach when it comes to stuff like that, and I like to read into things more than I really should. It's really fun for me. So when it comes to this kind of stuff, I'm not going to say my opinion is the most objective way to look at it. It's more that it's just an open way of looking at things. This comic you can interpret in a couple different ways, although the ending is... we'll talk about the ending. Batman exits and enters through a gate, passing Gordon and entering the Arkham Asylum, with the Commissioner following in his footsteps. I really like the next few panels on this page. James is directly behind Batman with him appearing in his footsteps, and the next 3 panels display Harvey Dent in his cell. Absolutely love the way the artist portrays Harvey's disfigurement here, with the center bar on his cell dividing each side of his body from the unscarred and the scarred. What's cool about this is how Gordon is on Harvey's left side, the unscarred part, and Batman is on Harvey's right side, the scarred part. This isn't like Philosophy Hour on YouTube, but I really like reading into things, so here we go. I kind of read Batman being on the right side of Harvey's body as being able to deal with the ugliness of society that police can't deal with, and James, Gordon, being on the left side of his body, the unscarred part, being only able to handle so much with the horrible parts of society. He can't deal with the Joker or Bane or Killer Croc properly. He can only do so much, and the police really, when you think about it, they can't go around shooting these people. You can't just shoot the Joker, but you also can't necessarily effectively apprehend them at times. It's very difficult for the police to take down these people, and that's where people like Batman and Robin and Superman come in. They have to do the things they do to help society function, because these supervillains are very difficult to take down, and like I said, the police don't always have the proper methods to dealing with them. So Batman eventually arrives at an unknown inmate's cell, 801. He steps inside and the person within is placing down cards. The next panel reveals that it's an oddly quiet Joker, and with the beginning of a joke on the top left-hand corner of the panel, there were these 2 guys in a lunatic asylum. Batman grabs a chair, sits down, and begins to talk to the Joker. He says that he's been thinking about their odd relationship. Batman inquires about how it's going to end between them, ending with a question. We're gonna kill each other, aren't we? There's something here I absolutely adore when it comes to superheroes and dealing with their villains. I like it when a hero actually tries to make sure their villain is okay. And when I mean that, I don't mean just non-lethally taking them out. I mean not just locking them away and throwing away the key. While yes, we probably should lock away the key when it comes to people like the Joker or Harley Quinn, but these are also people still. They deserve to have a chance at rehabilitation, and Batman wants them to be rehabilitated. He doesn't want to see these people suffer. It's really interesting the way Batman is written here, because you always see Batman beat the shit out of the Joker, or beat up Bane, or beat up these characters, but we never see what happens after. We never see him try to talk to them, and I like that this comic just opens straight up with a pretty heavy question from Batman, like, hey, we're gonna kill each other, aren't we? Like, I don't see this going any other way. This is one of the reasons I like some of Alan Moore's writing, especially in The Watchmen, which doesn't really touch this that much. It kind of explores other parts of superhero society, and I that's a whole video. I think I talked about that, but I really want to do a Watchmen video. It's genuinely one of my favorite comics. I think Invincible kind of overtakes Watchmen because it does everything that Watchmen does, but I think I like the characters a little bit more, but generally Watchmen I really like. And again, that's why I like this graphic novel a lot, is because Alan Moore explores the more human parts of being a superhero and not just beating up the bad guys and calling it a day. Regardless of the spiel I just said, the Joker remains quiet, too quiet, Upon reaching towards the Joker's hand, makeup rubs off on Batman's glove and he immediately reaches for the man's face, rubbing off the rest of the makeup and saying, "Do you realize? Do you realize?" I'm sorry, I can't say this without thinking of the Chris Chan meme.
Log introduction, because this is dead serious. The inside and outside tour I did a few months ago of my house. Everyone on the internet, my mother and my father are angry at me. I want everything about my house off the internet.
Go work on it.
I am.
Do you realize something? Let me tell you.
Yeah, that one. I'm not gonna. I can't say that. It's just too funny. Every time I hear "Do you realize?" I just think of Bob Chandler breaking down the door with his axe and saying he's gonna cut down the internet. But yeah, Batman is really mad that this dumbass literally just swapped places with the Joker and was like, yeah, why not? Why not just let this lunatic who probably could have killed me instead of just letting me live and take his place out and set free? While Batman is handling this imposter, Gordon hears rummaging and he says that if Batman hurts a hair on the Joker's head, but before he can finish his sentence, Batman takes off the man's wig and throws it at Gordon. And I love this. It's just a pretty goofy little gag to me. It never fails to at least get a smile out of me. The next page opens with "Where is he?" to then show exactly where the Joker is at. He's buying a rundown carnival, which the guy he's buying it off of is genuinely curious if he actually wants to buy it, given its downtrodden state, to which the Joker says he's crazy for it and he loves the state of disrepair that each section of the carnival is in. To all this, all I have to say is, does the seller even know who the Joker is? I mean, if he does, like, shouldn't he be worried about being killed or kidnapped or literally anything? And I mean, it isn't like the Joker is a new character in Gotham. He's very well established by this time in the comic. That's why Batman's coming to him in the first place to say, like, hey, we're gonna kill each other, aren't we? So the seller is being a doofus. Well, I'm not going to sit here and pick apart the smaller plot issues I have with the story. I might point them out, but generally the story is pretty well done and pretty tight-knit. It's good enough to where I'm not going to complain about smaller stuff like this. I might joke at it, but I'm not going to be like, hey, this is a 0 out of 10 because it doesn't explain this small little issue. During the next few pages, and a running subplot throughout the whole comic, is the Joker's past, like I mentioned earlier when I did the intro for the video. I don't really know how I feel about it. On one hand, some of the takes like the Joker movie and this comic in particular are very interesting ideas, but on the other hand, I also feel like the Joker is one of those characters who works better when he has no definitive past. Regardless of how I feel about the Joker having a past, the way his is written, or at least implied in this comic, is very interesting. And I say implied because later in the comic, the Joker makes a little goof about possibly not having a past or possibly not having a real reason to be the way he is. But I think generally the way it's presented here, in this comic at least, is the reason the Joker is the way he is. During this flashback, we see the Joker, who I don't think is ever explicitly named, in that we don't have a name for him during these past bits, so I'm still going to continue to refer to him as the Joker. Whoever he was as a person is more or less gone, and I say more or less because during this, he definitely comes across as a nervous person who isn't very good at handling immense pressure. I mean, it's reasonable. At this section of the flashback, it's established that he has a pregnant wife, and while it's not established yet, he also recently quit a stable job to work as a failing comedian. When his wife asks him how his act went, he said he was too nervous to deliver the punchline correctly, to which she says, "Oh." And then he goes off on her. He makes all these absurd assumptions about what she's thinking and what she meant by just the simple phrase, "Oh." The more I talk about this version of an origin story, the more I actually like it. Like, I really love the Joker movie, but that more so fits as a movie about what happens when people who need help aren't given the proper resources. Where this version of the Joker's origin, it very much comes across as someone who is nervous to fail and so deeply afraid to be any kind of letdown. We can very much tell from this that he doesn't want to let go of the life he has, and he will do anything to preserve it, which is something that will come to bite him in the ass later. So a couple of the last interesting parts that I'd like to talk about here is that while he's talking about how he wants to get his wife and soon-to-be-born baby out of the stump of an apartment they live in, he goes on to lean his head out the window, but we can see that instead of seeing a street or a grassy field, all we see is a brick wall. Something that surely reflects his mental state at this point in the story. And after that, while his wife reaches her hand out to tell him that it's all going to be okay, the panel switches to an animatronic clown. Which, like, ouch. At that point, if I were him, I probably feel like my life was a joke because whatever I had is totally and utterly gone now. Anyways, the story pushes forward, and the Joker informs the man that he will be acquiring the park and wants to shake on it to seal the deal. Yeah, you know where this is going. He does treat the seller well by telling him he's free to stick around, and, like, is he really a bad guy for doing that? He just bought the park off of this guy, and he's like, hey, yeah, you can just stick around, free ride, do whatever you want. No, it's evil. It's evil. Following this, we get Batman's perspective, with him being in the cat cave. Following this, we get Batman's perspective, with him being in the Batcave looking for information about who the Joker really is and still coming up short-handed, with photos of the Joker displaying unknown next to them. The scene ends with a very interesting line here, and it's among one of my favorites in generally like all of comics because I think it's a really good phrase that can go for a lot of different things. How can two people hate so much without knowing each other? I don't want to reach with this line. There's a lot of real life applications that you could use to this. I think it's just a really interesting line between the Batman and the Joker where they really don't know anything about each other. And that can be the case for villains and heroes at times. They hate each other and they really don't know anything about each other. The Batman doesn't know anything about the Joker, and the Joker vice versa. I love the idea of these characters who kind of hate each other. I'd say the Batman definitely hates the Joker, but he also, in some capacity, does care to get the guy help. He wouldn't have gone to the asylum if he didn't want to help the Joker in some way. The next scene is probably one of the harder ones to read, so you know I'm going to have a lot of fun with it. It starts with Gordon clipping out the latest newspaper article describing Joker's escape. Barbara and Gordon are enjoying their time together, drinking coca, reminiscing on history of Batman and Joker, and just general nostalgia. Barbara mentions how terrified she was of just the description of the Joker alone when she was a kid, to which Gordon remarks that he thought she would have liked it. Why would a kid like that? I was terrified of Jeff the Killer as a kid. I think the Joker would have scared me more. Actually, the Jack Nicholson Joker looks pretty cool. I like that. I like that Joker. This doesn't last long though, as Gordon has a weird sense of knowing when someone is at the door. And no, I'm not kidding. In the movie, it's different. You can actually hear the door being knocked on, but when it comes to the comic, for some reason, Gordon is just like, oh, hey, someone's at the door. And there's really no indication of if someone is at the door. I looked at the panel a couple of times and I seriously could not figure out how the dude knew that someone was at the door. And there's no indication of a noise being made. So I choose to believe that Gordon has super amazing hearing, Superman levels of hearing. So yeah, that's what pushes the story forward here. Barbara goes to open the door, saying it must be her friend from yoga class, but it isn't. It's the Joker with his bright red lips, pasty white skin, and his dark eyes only displaying his demonic pupils. The next two panels would definitely take like a couple of seconds if this was like a live action movie. In fact, in the actual animation, it does take a couple of seconds, which I really appreciated that because I think the Joker definitely wanted to be like, yeah, I figured out where you live and I also have a gun and I'm going to shoot you right now. It's definitely a Joker thing to do. Barbara hits the glass table, breaking it, falling on the floor and clutching her stomach in pain. Gordon quickly reaches to help her, but realizing that the Joker's in his house, he turns to hit the Joker, but is unfortunately knocked out by the Joker's bodyguard. All this happens while the Joker starts relating Barbara to a book, in that her spine is busted. Please, don't worry, it's a psychological complaint, common amongst ex-librarians. You see, she thinks she's a coffee table edition, mind you. I can't say much about the volume's condition. I mean, there's a hole in the jacket, and her spine appears to be damaged. Frankly, she won't be walking off the shelves in this state of repair. In fact, the idea of her walking anywhere seems increasingly remote. But then, that's always a problem with softbacks. It is, but evil. He's also saying all this while he's wearing a Hawaiian t-shirt and khaki shorts, so like just a total dad appearance going on right here. One of the worst parts of the scene and why I say this scene is so hard to read is Barbara lying on the ground, crying and sobbing, asking him, why are you doing this? And he just reaches to her blouse and he pulls out a camera and he says, to prove a point. Yeah, you know what happened here. It's terrible. This leads into the next flashback of the Joker, instead of reaching for Barbara's blouse, reaching for some honestly tasty looking shrimp. I don't blame the guy right there. In this recollection, the Joker is talking to a few mobsters or gangsters. I'm gonna go with gangsters on this one. He's talking to a few gangsters about how he wouldn't be turning to crime if it wasn't something important. Yeah, that's what they all say. And that he was originally a lab assistant with what he describes to be at least a very good job, but he was so sure that he had what it takes to be a comedian that he, quit his job and took up a failing and dying career that he had no hopes of actually succeeding in. I know it's supposed to be kind of sympathetic, but really when you have a baby and you have a wife and you're living in a pretty shitty apartment where you're barely paying rent, you shouldn't quit your job for a very difficult to pursue career. It's like when people quit their jobs to become YouTubers or content influencers. He has this idea that he knows how to be a comedian, and it's like, dude, no, you don't. And I don't sympathize with someone who is supposed to be taking care of his family and he's doing the furthest thing from that. He's very stressed out as is, and he's just like, yeah, I know how to become a comedian. I know what I'm doing, and he doesn't. This is very reckless of him to do. Again, I know it sounds like I'm downplaying it, which I'm gonna downplay it because I think the Joker is a terrible person who does terrible things and justifies it in this comic for terrible reasons. Do I feel bad for the guy? Yeah, a little bit when it comes to wanting to pursue a career that you like or wanting to pursue a passion that you like, but ultimately at the end of the day, you have to be responsible with your decisions, which goes like quadruple for adults. And yeah, that's about it. That's about how much I'm gonna sympathize with the Joker here. So during this scene, the Joker is turning to these gangsters to help him make a good portion of money to get his family out of the hellhole he's living in. They eventually elaborate that they want to go through the old chemical plant he worked at so they can get to the playing card company next door, and since he knows the layout of it, he should be able to guide them through with no problem. Very, like, I don't know, Payday-esque. It reminds me of like playing Payday 2 and memorizing all the guard patterns and stuff like that. And when he's asking about how he can ensure that nobody's going to know his identity, they pull out the red hood, which I always kind of got confused by that because it's literally a red helmet. To me, a hood is something you kind of put over your head. I'm not going to put a hoodie on right now. I don't feel like it, but you know what a hoodie is and you know what a hood is. And that most certainly looks like some kind of helmet to me, but I'm going to go with red hood still. There's some more talk from the Joker about how much he wants to get his family out of poverty and how much he wants to help them. And this is the part where I do sympathize with him. Like I feel bad for shit talking someone who is turning the crime for this stuff, but also you're turning the crime and you're turning the crime that gets people hurt and you don't have a justification for that. And I don't mean stealing bread for your family. I mean literally getting people killed, as you'll see later on in the comic. Also, in the second to last panel, you can actually see Cobblepot, which I always appreciate seeing villains before their sort of prime in like Batman comics or superhero comics in general. I just think it's a neat little detail that I love that the artist put in. Following that, we get another heartbreaking scene of Batman visiting an unconscious Barbara in the hospital. And during this, he mostly gets information about what happened to Barbara and finding out that she was undressed by the Joker. And you can see the anger in Batman's face in this. He's not flipping tables or breaking walls, but he is very, very angry that the Joker undressed Barbara. What really hurts my heart here is seeing Barbara literally crying and clenching Batman's cape while telling him that this was different from all the other times that the Joker did something evil. That he was trying to prove a point this time. And the scene ends with her saying, "What's he gonna do with my father?" Also, I want to mention how fantastic the art is in this comic. I didn't know this, but I had the deluxe version of it. I didn't know there was a difference. I thought this was always just the way the comic looked. Naive, I know. But when I looked like a little bit further into it, I found out there's like two versions of the comic. One from the 80s and one that was sort of remastered in like 2021, which I like the coloring a little bit more, but I also don't like overwriting an artist's current work. I have a thing about not liking when certain games get remakes like Metal Gear Solid 3 or Resident Evil 4 because I felt like there's a possibility that you might lose some of the original idea and design behind the creation. Again, I'm not really solid about which one I like more. I think both look really good, but I just wanted to point out that I am reading the deluxe version and I did go through the 1988 version just to see the differences, and it's a lot, but again, like I said, I'm kind of not really solid on either one. So the next scene is definitely one of the more disturbing scenes I've seen come out of Batman media. It follows what happened after the Joker shot Barbara and kidnapped Gordon. I don't think I mentioned that. He did kidnap Gordon. Gordon is no bueno. He's not in a good spot right now. They literally stripped a man naked and slap a collar on him, kinky, and shock him to make sure he can get up and start moving to the Joker. Also, I want to say, like, are these circus folk literally evil? Like earlier in the comic, you see posters that display the characters that are now colluding with the Joker on a scheme, but like, were they evil before or are they low on money? I don't really know. And just like, why would you do this? These people probably have a hard enough time getting a job as is, and now with probably like kidnapping and assault and I don't know, I'm not a lawyer, I don't know all the fancy charges, it's probably gonna become a hell of a lot harder for them to get jobs now. Anyways, Gordon asks the Joker what he's doing, and the Joker tells him, "Doing? You're doing what any sane man in your appalling circumstances would do. You're going mad." So I think this is one of the moments where it's becoming increasingly clear what the Joker's goal and motivation here is. But I'm gonna wait just a little bit longer to explain what the Joker's doing and go into his reasoning behind it, which his reasoning is pretty obvious, but I'd still like to talk about it in general, which is, why I'm doing this video in the first place. I love this comic and I really want to talk about it. After the Joker tells Gordon that he's going mad, Gordon says, "Oh no, I remember." The Joker goes on to say how Gordon shouldn't go on remembering things, that remembering's dangerous. This entire speech is about how you should push all of the negative parts of your past out of your head and how it does nothing good for you in the moment, and that the only thing worth remembering is that madness is an emergency exit. This is very interesting as an idea. One of the ideas I love about characters like Batman, Daredevil, and the Joker is that... Sorry for interjecting here, but I did mean to say Spider-Man, not the Joker, because, the Joker did give up. All of these people are people who refuse to give up, that they don't care about how scared they are or how unlikely the event of them winning is. These are people who will fight off anything that threatens the lives of the people around them, even if they never met. What the Joker is saying here is to just give up, to instead of facing reality and accepting what's happened, to just reject it all and pretend that everything's either okay or that it didn't happen at all. You can just step outside and close the door on all those dreadful things that happened and lock them away forever. This speech about locking memories away that are hard to accept is followed by a flashback that is telling of why someone like the Joker would talk big game about embracing insanity and locking away all the sadder parts of one's life. The Joker is sitting with the mobsters again, talking about the job they're gonna go through with, when two officers walk in and question the bartender about where the Joker is. He points over to the table that the Joker's at, and when they think they're about to be busted for conspiracy to commit a crime, the officer informs the Joker that his wife and unborn child were killed in a freak accident, that a baby bottle heater malfunctioned and electrocuted his wife and unborn baby. And it gets worse from here. Even though the Joker told these guys that his wife and kid died, that the only reason he wanted to go through with this job to begin with was for his wife and kid, and now he doesn't have a reason to do it anymore. These guys just tell him to suck it up and meet with them outside the chemical plant that night. I think this is definitely one of the parts that led him to insanity, but there's still the next event at the chem plant that needs to play out for him to fully transform into the Joker that we know him as today. Back in the present, Gordon is going through a literal roller coaster of events. He's trapped on a minecart, listening and seeing the Joker on all these TVs, continuing in his spiel about how awful the world is and how it would be so much easier to ignore it all and take the mental emergency exit. And near the end of the ride, instead of it being the Joker on the TV, it's a crying Barbara. And this is where Gordon finally starts screaming in absolute terror. Also, throughout the comic, when it goes to a flashback, the same pose one character has in one panel is usually followed through on another character in the next. So near the end of the flashback, when the Joker finds out his wife died and is being told he still needs to commit a crime he didn't even want to do to begin with, he crosses both of his arms with his head down, and in the present we see Gordon in the exact same pose. Following Gordon's possible mental breakdown, Batman scours the city looking for any clues as to the Joker's whereabouts, and while he's looking for these hints, he sees the bat signal in the sky. Upon arriving and meeting with Bullock, he receives an invitation to the circus grounds where the Joker is holding Gordon captive. So after this, the last flashback for the rest of the comic happens, and I mean, you know what happens here. You know how the Joker becomes the Joker. Or maybe you don't, maybe that's why you're watching this video, but alright, let's get to it. The Joker is staring at his reflection in the chemical waste plant's exit. It looks like an exit, but it basically just where all the dirty water goes. Oh fuck. He's already, and I mean understandably, mentally checked out. He's having to be reminded what he's here to do. And he goes on to say, "I was just remembering. I used to walk along here on the way to work each morning." The gangsters aren't having his spaced out behavior and force him to put on the red hood. When they place it over his head, all you can see is the red image of the gangster in the hat, and he goes on to talk about how stuffy it is and that his voice sounds so echoey, asking if it sounds like that to them too. More sadly, he adds that everything feels like a weird dream to him right now, and that, yeah, I mean, if I lost my significant other and my kid in a freak baby bottle heater accident, or just really anything in general, I would feel very, very mentally distraught, and I would feel like nothing is real. I mean, we've probably all had those moments where something feels just off, like when you lose a loved one and that piece of your life is just ripped out so fast that you don't have any time to adjust. I mean, how would you have time to adjust to such a horrible thing? While having a tough time moving up the steps and beginning to cross the walkway through the chemical plant, a cop spots them, and the gangster in the hat opens fire on him, but he receives return fire, losing his life. The Joker and the remaining gangster are in panic, and like the coward he is, the gangster tries to pin the blame on the Joker, which, like, that was probably the plan all along. It was probably the reason they brought the Red Hood with them, to, if they got caught after or during, to pin the blame on the Joker and be like, oh, he's our ringleader, he's just telling us what to do. We want to get a lighter sentence, I'll tell you who he is. Sounds about right for these kinds of people. The remaining mobster reaches for his gun and is swiftly shot down, leaving the Joker to be the only one left to run away and find some kind of emergency exit. Running across the catwalk, the officers are ready to open fire, but then Batman jumps over them, telling them that he'll take care of it their way. Batman confronts the Joker, who he believes to be the Red Hood, but before he can subdue him, the Joker jumps into the chemical water and is spat out into the same water he was once staring at in the beginning of the flashback. He crawls up the grass, doing his best to get stable footing. Standing up, he complains about how it's stinging and itching and burning his face, that he needs to get up and take his helmet off, but when he takes his helmet off, finally, after removing the Red Hood, he sees in the reflection of the water his new permanently scarred appearance. And now there's nothing left for him to do but laugh. Laugh at the absurd circumstances, at everything that's happened to bring him to this moment. The passing of his family, being forced to commit a crime he no longer needed to commit, and watching two men die in front of him, and now his totally irreparably damaged appearance. The Joker, in the span of a single day, has lost everything and isn't even recognizable as the human he once was. Surely a part of why he's gone so long without his past being found out. He might as well not even have a past, as he's clearly not that person anymore. He might have that same DNA as that person, but he has a totally different mindset now. Something in him permanently changed for the worse, and as a result, it changed his outlook on everything. In the present, the Joker and his posse of circus folk are mocking Gordon for being the average man. He's locked in a cage, and the Joker refers to him as the average man, physically unremarkable. It has instead a deformed set of values. Notice the hideously bloated sense of humanity's importance, the club-footed social conscience, and withered optimism. And one of my favorite parts of what the Joker says here, most repulsive of all are its frail and useless notions of order and sanity. If too much weight is placed upon them, they snap. Before the Joker can continue with his ridiculous spiel about the average man's mind, you see two beams of light in the distance, growing closer with each panel, until finally, once again, the Batmobile arrives and Batman jumps out. In the next several panels, text appears, being what Batman came to talk to the Joker about earlier in the comic. There's also this really cool shot with Batman on the left side of the panel, Gordon in the middle, and Joker on the right, looking smug. Batman lunges forward with the text, "We're gonna kill each other, aren't we?" displayed on the panel. The Joker sprays some sort of toxic liquid on Batman's arm and runs away, with each panel showing text of what Batman initially came to talk to the Joker about earlier in the comic. Batman gets Gordon out of the cage and tells Gordon he'll wait for him, given that he doesn't know what sort of mental state he's in. But to really nobody's surprise, Gordon is just lasered in on getting Joker back in prison. And I love this stuff. I know it's sort of generic to say, oh, the human spirit wins again, but I always eat this up and I refuse to let anyone tell me this old trope needs to die. And I have seen people say that, so don't tell me nobody says that. After Gordon's refusal to let Batman stay with him, he tells Batman, "I want him brought in, and I want him brought in by the book." Batman tells him he'll do his best, and Gordon says, "By the book, you hear? We have to show him our way works." Stuff like this right here is why I love when heroes don't kill. I love the idea of, although the justice system can be flawed in many ways, that the hero absolutely and totally refuses to kill. It's a part of why I like the Daredevil TV show so much, not so much the comic. I think the comic is pretty decent. I haven't read enough comic Daredevil material, but the TV show Daredevil is easily one of my favorite heroes of all time. The justice system might be flawed, but if the Batman or Gordon just outright killed the Joker, then what would happen to people like Harvey Dent? And how far down the chain would you go until you're just killing someone who stole a candy bar? I know it's a very easy topic to talk about, and it's something that happens when it comes to people like Batman or Spider-Man and whatnot, but it's a topic I think is very important when it comes to these superheroes because they have a reason not to kill. They don't want to inflict the same pain that was brought upon them onto others. They don't want these other people to experience the same pain that they felt. This is actually something the Walking Dead comic does a wonderful job at talking about. During his time in prison, Rick makes a seemingly justified rule that if you kill, you die. But if I remember correctly, Dale is the one who mentions like, hey, Rick, you killed that guy. Even if he was a threat to you, you killed him. By your very rule, that means that you die. That's like a whole thing in the comic that I don't really want to touch on right here because that, if people want me to talk about it in the future, I could. But the whole idea behind The Walking Dead is how does society reform and come back to being the society we know it as today under such horrible and awful circumstances with people killing each other and hurting each other constantly. And it's just really interesting to see humanity rise back up in that comic. And that's, something that happens here sometimes. You see people doing awful and evil things, but it doesn't matter. You have to do things the right way. You have to arrest them. You have to take them to court and you have to give them a proper trial by jury or proper trial in general. You have to prove that they're guilty, not just assume that they're guilty. But the whole idea of doing things by the book, no matter how flawed, I love it. And I'm all here for media when it comes to that kind of commentary. So Batman enters after the Joker, and Joker is making it very clear to the reader and Batman that all this was to prove a point that all it takes is one bad day for you to fall off the edge, and that there's no difference between him and any other average person. The Joker runs around ranting about how many times someone has almost begun a new world war and how the last world war actually started, which I don't think it's accurate, but he claims it to be true, so it must be true. This is one of the more interesting parts I like about the Joker here is that his family was taken by absolute chaos. And I don't mean like, oh, it's like some opposing force like God. I mean, it's just a random accident. It could happen to anyone. You could die in a car crash. A plane could crash into your house. No matter how absurd that is, that's a thing that could happen. There's always a risk that some random act of violence could be thrust upon you. And I think the Joker kind of embodies the chaos and randomness of the world, where Batman is supposed to be this stern order. The Joker answers that with this absolute and total random violence. I haven't consumed a lot of Joker media, but what I have consumed, he pretty much does embody that to some degree. I think that's why the Joker does such a good job at eluding Batman in so many scenarios. Not that the Joker is this mastermind, just that he's so random and chaotic that it's very hard to predict his next moves. Much like how it would have been hard for the Joker to predict that a baby bottle heater would have killed his wife and unborn child. Instead of accepting the random accident that happened, he became this random chaos of nature. This chaos that's going to kill people at random and do things at random to prove a point that, hey, it could happen to anyone. And I'm not saying that everything the Joker does is random. I'm just saying that I could see him kind of symbolizing that in one way or another. Also, the last panel of the Joker before Batman finally catches him, he's just straight up handsome Squidward. And there's a similar one like this in the animated movie, which I think looks worse, but it's still pretty funny. The Joker says here, it's all a joke. Everything anybody ever valued or struggled for, it's all a monstrous, demented gag. So why can't you see the funny side? Why aren't you laughing? Batman breaks through the glass and he says, because I've heard it before, and because it wasn't funny the first time. Batman adds that whatever the Joker wanted to happen didn't happen, and that Gordon is as sane as he ever was. So maybe ordinary people don't always crack. Maybe there isn't any need to crawl under a rock with all the other slimy things when trouble hits. Maybe it was just you the whole time. Joker screams no and pulls Batman's mask down and smacks him with a 2x4, briefly stunning him. He pulls out a knife and goes to stab him, but Batman grabs Joker by the wrist and he hits him twice, once in the gut and the second in the face, knocking him through a window. The Joker falls on his chest and lingers for a moment before turning around and firing a gun. It's empty. He's defeated now, physically and spiritually. He goes on to say, well, what are you waiting for? I shot a defenseless girl, terrorized an old man. Why don't you kick the hell out of me and get a standing ovation from the public gallery? To this, Batman says, because I'm doing this one by the book, and because I don't want to. He goes on to rephrase what he came to talk to the Joker about earlier, that he doesn't want to hurt the Joker and that he doesn't want either of them to kill each other, but that they're running out of alternatives. Batman goes on to say he doesn't know what bent Joker's life so out of shape, but maybe there's a way to rehabilitate him. Maybe there's a way to get him help and eventually put him back in society in a way where he could actually contribute enough that he doesn't need to be alone anymore. And you can't see it because I don't really have a great camera, but I am like kind of about to cry because he really does, in some twisted way, care about the Joker here. Maybe not like, oh, I love you, man. More that like, you're mentally ill and you need help and I don't know how to help you. And I just want you to understand that we need to get you help. You need to stop killing people and we need to stop fighting. I don't like hitting you. I don't want to do this to you. I want to help you. I want you to become someone who can participate in society. Remember what I said about loving this kind of writing? Because I'm all here for it. I'm never gonna not love it. The Joker replies, "No, I'm sorry, but no, it's too late for that. Far too late. You know, it's funny. It reminds me of a joke. See, there were these two guys in a lunatic asylum. One night, they decide they don't like living in an asylum anymore. So, like, they get up on the roof, and there, just across this narrow gap, they see the rooftops of the town, stretching away in the moonlight, stretching away to freedom. Now, the first guy, he jumps right across with no problem. But his friend daredn't make the leap. You see, he's afraid of falling. So the first guy has an idea. He says, hey, I have my flashlight. I'll shine it across the gap between the buildings so you can walk along the beam and join me. But the second guy just shakes his head. He says, what do you think, I'm crazy? You turn it off when I'm halfway across. After a moment of the Joker laughing to himself, Batman begins to chuckle, and they eventually both laugh. Batman places a hand on the Joker's shoulder, and the last 3 panels of the comic display a light shining brightly between their feet, before eventually, along with their feet, the light disappears. Batman the Killing Joke is an absolutely fantastic comic, and one of the comics that actually woke me up to the idea that superheroes don't need to just punch people and run away. They can actually help their rogues gallery, or at least some people in them, be rehabilitated, and these people are sick. People like Harvey Dent, people like the Joker, are all sick and they need help. There's something in their head that tells them that they have to do this thing that they shouldn't do. It's not always about saving the day. Sometimes it can be about getting through to someone who you hate and in turn hates you back. Someone who's done awful and irredeemable things, but wanting to prove the point that the justice system can work and wanting to rehabilitate people that the public would probably deem beyond rehabilitation. I also want to add that even though I just went through the entire comic, this is one of those comics where you really should just read it yourself, and that no amount of commentary I can add to it will amount to whatever you might find. I could probably read through this thing 100 more times and there's still things that only you would pick up. So again, I'm going to leave an Amazon link in the description because I want people to buy this masterpiece. As iffy as I was about the Joker having a past here, I think it was done really well as a backstory for why the Joker does what he does. Even though it's not justifiable and he's definitely still an awful person for doing what he does, you can kind of understand why he ends up doing the things he does and why he would want to lock all those awful memories away. As tragic as his past may be, we also witnessed how weak he was. That also is an insult, by the way. There's nothing wrong with having a fragile mind, but that's not an excuse to do the things he does. Throughout the entire comic and all of the flashbacks, the Joker makes the worst possible decision at every single turn, leaving his very stable job to pursue a very unstable career, and when that doesn't work out, turning to crime without realizing how unlikely it is the job would have gone right to begin with, and even if it did go right, not really seeing that it's possible that they might have, planned to frame him after the fact, because why would they want to give money to this random guy? I remain with the idea that they never planned on giving him the money, that they were probably going to turn him in the moment they got whatever it is they were going there to get. And that's something I didn't realize when I was initially reading this comic, and it took me, I think, until actually drafting out the script for this video to realize that the Joker was never going to get away with this, at least with the chemical plant stuff. He was always probably going to be turned in, and I think that's a neat little detail too, because really, when you think about it, shouldn't all of them be wearing red hoods and not just the Joker? Like, why is he the special one? And it's obviously to make sure that if he gets caught, he's going to be posed as the ringleader, because in court, they'd be like, why are you wearing the mask? And if he says, oh, well, these guys gave it to me, why would you believe that? Also, earlier, when Batman's talking to the Joker, he mentions that maybe he was always weak-minded, that not everyone who has a bad day turns out like him. And yeah, that's true. Batman had a very, very bad day, and he did not at all turn out to like the Joker. Even though he dresses up as a bat and beats the shit out of criminals, he doesn't kill people and make this gas that makes people laugh themselves to death. He doesn't hurt random people for seemingly no reason. Batman wants to prevent the tragedy that happened to him, whereas the Joker, he kind of wants to project that tragedy that happened to him. Maybe not literally, but in some symbolic way, like I said, the Joker wants to embody chaos. During the last few panels, when the Joker and Batman are laughing and Batman places his hand on the Joker, I've seen a lot of people talk about how Batman probably kills the Joker here, but I don't think so. I don't think Batman would have gone through all this effort to just kill him at the end. Like how Gordon talks to Batman before Batman runs off to catch the Joker, that he wants him brought in by the book, and Batman says he'll try. I think that Batman really did bring him in by the book. I think he arrested the Joker right there, and they went to the regular scheduled program. I don't think that Batman would have killed the Joker here. I think that would defeat the entire purpose of Batman's character. It might be a cool thought experiment to be like, oh, did Batman kill the Joker here? I don't think we've seen Batman put through enough in this comic to be like, yeah, I'm gonna kill the Joker because that's totally not gonna break my moral code at all. And also, Batman's the one with the flashlight in the joke. The joke about the two guys being on top of the lunatic asylum. Batman's the one saying, hey, take my hand, I'll help you. And the Joker just doesn't trust him. For one reason or another, he doesn't think he's able to come back. He doesn't think he can come back from this tragedy that he's caused, from the many tragedies that he's caused. And when you realize that, there's also so many moments in the comic where when Batman's arrived to see the Joker, as in not come on the panel, but I mean when they're in the same room or the reader thinks they're in the same room, i.e. the beginning of the comic, there's always a light near them. There's always the two headlights of the Batmobile. There's always the light beam across the ceiling where Batman is walking through the carnival, dividing the Joker and Batman himself, with the Joker in Batman's shadow. I think that's absolutely a reach, but I don't care. I like to view it that way. You don't have to. But the idea here is that Batman in some way trusts the Joker enough to give him that light, give him that helping hand. Maybe there's a way for the Joker to come back from whatever bent his life so out of shape. Unfortunately, the Joker just doesn't trust him. Joker's whole idea about being one bad day from falling off the edge reminds me of the movie Falling Down, and if you haven't seen it, you probably have. You've probably at least seen the clip of Bill walking into the restaurant demanding breakfast when they don't serve it anymore. But to my original point, during the movie, the protagonist Bill says,
"Past the point of no return, Beth. Do you know when that is? That's the point in a journey where it's longer to go back to the beginning than it is to continue to the end."
There's more to that, but I don't want to spoil the entire movie. That's just a small snippet, and it could be taken out of context anywhere, so I don't think you can't watch that movie because I told you a small portion of it. And you can kind of get what the movie's about based on the title, Falling Down. It's about a guy who's had a really bad day. Before I finish the video, I do want to show my initial thoughts and reactions to the Killing Joke animated movie, which it was very poorly done. Hello, future me. Just heads up. Movie's really bad. Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, because you watched it. But the scene transitions are really weird. They didn't really stick with the comics. The first 30 minutes of the movie can straight up be skipped. And I even have timestamps for sections of the movie where you do not need to consume this portion of the material. And it's just generally when you get past the first 30 minutes and Batman actually goes to the asylum, it's okay, this is pretty on point. There's some smaller sections within the actual Killing Joke story that can be skipped, but other than that, it's really bad. There's Barbara sleeps with Batman, and there's a really weird dynamic of power there. And also, they make her a total bitch. She goes out of her way to attack a criminal who's very dangerous, and even though the first time she encounters him, she didn't really fight well compared to the next time, And there's this really cringe line that Batman delivers before that, where he's like, "I widowy have darkness inside of me," and he's doing like this really cringe edgelord thing about seeing the abyss, and maybe the line just wasn't delivered properly, or maybe it's just not a good line in general. And that was irritating. I'm near the end of the movie right now, and it's pretty on point for where the rest of the comic is, and I just wanted to get my thoughts out. Also, there's this scene, a part of the scenes that you can skip within the actual movie, where the Joker like throws a sort of wig on Gordon, and he's like saying, "Oh, hey, what do you do to people who break the law and do this and that? And what would you do to this person?" And Gordon's like, "I would throw the book at them." And so the Joker, walks forward, and Gordon goes to throw the book, and a little cardboard cutout of Batman pops up, which, like, yeah, Batman's breaking the law. That's definitely a thing that has been established, that's been touched on by at this time of this movie's actual adaptation, probably several times. And it's like, you're not adding any interesting commentary like the original Killing Joke was adding with the Joker's sanity and how the Joker lost his mind. You're not adding anything interesting there in regards to the Batman stuff, and you really wouldn't be able to within this kind of film. You'd have to sort of rework that. If you wanted to do that, that should have been the first 30 minutes of the movie. You could have an interesting thing there with that, but ultimately they didn't. They decided that they wanted to just touch on the thing that everyone knows. Every origin Batman story has that. Batman Year One has that, and it did it infinitely better too. I know this is just like lightly grazing that section of it. I know they're not like trying to add this big commentary about that there, but there's definitely something that they meant to put there that it just fell like flat. Really, I see why people don't like this movie, and I understand that, like, you have to add like runtime for people for a movie to, like, I guess, movie. But man, it really reads as the people who adapted this into animation, the original parts of the animation, the parts that were not in the comic. It feels like the people who did that did not understand the tone of the comic and did not understand the relationship specifically between Batman and Barbara Gordon. It feels very much like, oh, this is a thing we're being asked to adapt, or this is a thing we can adapt, let's do it. Not, hey, what is this comic actually about? What's the tone of it? What is it trying to convey to the reader? What does Alan Moore, what does the artist, what do these people want the reader to come away with whenever they finish this comic? And I feel bad for people who watched the movie first. I was actually one of them. A few years ago, probably like 10 years ago, I watched the movie with my cousin, and I was like, is this the thing that people liked? Because it wasn't that good. Like, why did Batman sleep with Barbara? I don't know if that happens in the comics, like, in other parts, and if it does, that's totally, like, terrible, because it's just, you have this imbalance of power between Batman and Barbara Gordon. It'd be like sleeping with someone like your therapist, like in How I Met Your Mother. It's just so absurd. It's very absurd, and it's something I never ever would see Batman doing. I haven't read every issue of Batman. I haven't, like, consumed every movie, but I think I've consumed enough, and I have just general common sense and the understanding that is very, very bad for someone like Batman to sleep with Barbara Gordon, someone who is in some way Batman's best friend's daughter. I know Jim isn't exactly, like, I don't know their whole relationship and everything, but I've seen, like, in the Arkham games, they're pretty good friends. They like each other a lot. And so when you have him sleeping with his daughter in the movie, it's just like, I don't know if tone deaf is the correct term, but it just feels so fucking stupid. Excuse my language. It just does not fit in the movie. Like, really, that, like I said, the first 30 minutes does not fit in the movie at all. And it just comes across as, we need to pad this movie out to actually make it into like a sort of feature-length film. It's like, it's 70 minutes long. It's not really like deeply long, but yeah, I feel bad for people who watched this and were completely turned away from the comic, because the comic is fantastic. Also, this kind of reminds me of like an inverse situation, and I could be wrong. It's been a couple years since I watched this movie. I read the comic along with the movie. The Red Hood comic and the Red Hood movie, Under the Red Hood. Very, very excellent movie. I really, really like the movie. I remember 10 years ago, I was hanging out with my friend at Walmart, him, his dad, and another friend, and his dad was looking for the Red Hood animated movie. And we didn't watch it that night, but I remember at the time thinking, yeah, that's a pretty good movie. I remember as a kid watching that, and I went back a few years ago when I went through my whole, like, ooh, I gotta watch a bunch of Batman stuff, I gotta read Batman stuff, I gotta play the Arkham games. And I remember reading the comic and watching the movie and coming away from the whole sort of story with the idea that the movie is a little bit better than the comic, in that I think it explains Jason Todd's resurrection better. And the comic has the unfortunate added effect of being a part of the mainline comics, as far as I'm aware. And I remember there would be occasionally like pages where it would say, to continue this storyline, read this specific comic. And I'm like, I get that, but I just want to read the Red Hood stuff. Like, I know what they're going for in the comic, and it seemed more like an outline than anything. Whereas in the movie, it felt very refined. It felt like they knew exactly the story they wanted to tell, and they tightened it down. And that's the opposite of what we have here. At least what I believe we have here is a really, really, and I actually have a physical edition here, a really, really fantastic comic with a really, really bad animated adaptation. Yeah, I have this version, I think. Yeah. I have this version. I think it is fantastic. I love the dust cover. I like to talk about stuff that I actually have like physical versions of. I don't like having digital media. And I am reading this along with the movie. I'm comparing it because I need to know exactly where does the movie diverge and where does it stay on course. For the most part, it's really bad. I also wanted to add onto my last little past version of me talking about this. I don't know. Batman kills these goblin things. I know it's probably wrong to call them goblins, but they do torture Commissioner Gordon and are in cahoots with the Joker, so I don't mind calling them goblins. They're fucking evil. Yeah, he grabs one of them when he's on the ledge, about to fall in the spikes, and he throws it over his shoulder and kills it. He murders two, I think. I'm pretty sure he pulls two and throws both of them in there. I don't know. I think it was the Michael Keaton Batman that left the dude with the bomb to blow up, and like that was funny. This is like supposed to be a serious movie. This isn't like the original part of the movie where they were just padding out the runtime. I guess they are padding out the runtime now, but I figured, oh, maybe once we get to the Asylum, where in the comic where that starts, it'll be pretty faithful. And on and off, it kind of is. There's several moments, and like I previously said, there's timestamps I took down. If you really want to know, if you're like, oh, well, I don't want to read the comic, but I want to watch the movie, the actual part where the movie starts is at 3106, and then between 52 and 55, it's just like I believe a montage of Batman investigating random areas that he didn't investigate in the comic, and I typed down that those can be skipped. That's where eventually he meets up with Bullock and gets the invitation, and then arrives at the carnival ground. And even the carnival ground part is so irritating because in the comic he arrives and you have the lights behind the Joker and the Batman jumps out and all the sort of evil circus goers that the Joker hired run away. And it's just Batman, Commissioner Gordon, and the Joker. And in the movie, Batman is being forced to fight these like circus people. And like I said during the video, I haven't filmed the actual video yet. I need to do that. Like I said, did the Joker pay these people to fight him? Like, these people they're good fighters apparently too, and it's just weird seeing them fight. I don't think like you can't hire goons to fight, but it's just like the idea of these like circus people who just also are pretty good with combat is really weird. And also there's the large, I don't like saying it, but the fat lady and she's on top of this giant, like, not this giant, she's on top of the stand, and she whomps down, and it just makes this like explosion noise twice. I think she jumps down and makes like a loud thump, and then Batman like punches her in the boxers or something, and it makes another loud thump, which, like, I know it's a fight scene, and it's like, it's funny, it's weird, it's just like, it felt very not in line with the comic, and I know that's why people don't like this movie, or what I've heard. I don't know. I remember not liking this movie, and I remember hearing a lot of people say they don't like it. I don't like it, and I feel bad for the people who have only ever seen this movie. This whole, like, flashback bit was, like, not flashback, this whole bit where it actually stuck with the comics was pretty interesting. It was pretty, like, okay, it's not as well executed as the actual comic, but it's definitely getting there. And then the last bit where the Joker is actually telling his killing joke, I think it's Mark Hamill, I think he's doing the Joker in this. I didn't bother to check. I literally just finished the movie. Just read it so fast. Like, I know in the comic it's just the Joker talking for, like, I think a couple panels. But when you're reading that kind of thing, you gotta, like, space it out, because I think even, like, as a teenager when I watched that, I didn't get the joke because it just, like, hit you, boom, boom, boom. He's reading the joke way too fast, and it should have sort of been read very, like, not like slow, but normal. Not like the Joker's trying to get this joke out before he gets punched by Batman. So yeah, that's it. I'm not gonna add any more into this. This is the 10-minute review of the Killing Joke movie. Have fun. I think when I originally watched it was like 10 years ago, 8 years ago. It was long enough ago to where I filtered out a lot of the moments except for the part where Barbara and Batman sleep together, and that was just awful. But regardless of if you watched the Killing Joke movie or read the Killing Joke comic, the Joker is always going to be standing on the roof of the lunatic asylum, looking across the horizon at all the other buildings he could step on, but always being reluctant to step over the deep, dark gap that binds him to the asylum. But remember, no matter how bad a day you may be having, madness is your emergency exit.